Alright, good evening everybody. So let's talk Module 2, and we're going to talk about legal and ethical issues. By the way, Tyler and Alyssa, I have coffee, so the coughing, I'm not going to sound like I'm dying, hopefully. So the objectives for Module 2 are to know the difference between legal and ethical issues, understand Home Care Aide's role within those legal and ethical issues, be familiar with codes of ethics, understand the patient's rights and responsibilities, understand the Home Care Aide's rights and responsibilities, be able to give examples of ethical and unethical behaviors. So what's the difference between something that's legal protocols, but what's the difference between them? So ethics deal with what's right and what's wrong. It's having a sense of duty and responsibility towards others and situations, and it guides us to do what we should do. Kind of like having your mom on your shoulder when you go to do something and you know that she says you shouldn't do that. So an ethical person feels that they always try to do the right thing. Legal issues tell us what we have to do. So laws are put into place based upon ethics. So if you don't have an ethical issue, usually a law is not going to come out of it. So laws are put into place based on ethics, and governments are the ones that establish the laws to ensure safety. In healthcare, ethics and laws protect patients who are receiving care, but it also respects the caregivers who are providing the care. So many agencies establish their own set of guidelines for ethical behavior. Oftentimes it will be outlined in a policy or a protocol. It's helpful for the Home Care Aide to become familiar with the agency's mission or vision, as well as the Code of Ethics. And every agency has those. So Code of Ethics might include areas that ethical behavior should be applied, such as marketing, patient admissions, transfer, discharges, patient rights, medical research, confidentiality, billing, competence, resources, etc. And it outlines how decisions surrounding these issues are made. For example, we have 2 major hospitals in the area, but Duke actually owns 3 hospitals. They own Duke Raleigh, Duke Regional, formerly Durham Regional, and Duke University Hospital, Duke Hospital. So home care and hospice, where Ms. Ta works, has a nurse or a case manager in all of those hospitals. So what would happen? Would it be ethical if they only had a case manager at Big Duke, but not at the other 2 smaller hospitals? And while you're thinking, well, that's not really a big problem, well, if you're a patient of those smaller hospitals, you're not getting the exact same level of care that you would be getting at Duke. Hopefully that makes sense. So not all the areas will have to do with the Home Care Aide. However, agencies try to impress upon all their employees the importance of ethical behavior in every aspect of their organization. So let's talk what constitutes legal and ethical behavior. Examples of ethical and legal behaviors are being honest at all times. As a nurse or a nurse aide or a respiratory therapist, an occupational therapist, or a physician, that includes documenting and reporting exactly how long it took you to do something. Protecting patients' confidentiality. Abiding by the patient's care plan and never performing tasks outside of what you've been trained to do. Reporting patient observations to the supervisor, including suspected abuse or neglect. And believe it or not, you can't take money or a gift from a patient. I just listened to that last night, but I knew it. So, Code of Ethics for the Home Care Aide Association of America has established a Code of Ethics for home care aides. There's 5 basic principles. Principle number 1, the safety and well-being of the client or patient is the main concern in all decisions and actions. Principle number 2, highest level of honesty, integrity must be maintained in all dealings with the client and the employer. So when I say client, I mean patient. Number 3, quality services shall be provided in a conscientious, competent, client-centered manner. So that means it's all about the patient. You've had a bad day, they don't care. Number 4, the person and property of the client shall be respected with confidentiality, security, kindness, and recognition of that client's individuality. Number 5, all activities shall be carried out according to the employer policies and any laws that apply with any actual or possible violation reported to the employer immediately. So if you do something wrong or you make a mistake, you have to report it. As well as being treated ethically and legally, patients have rights that they need to be informed of prior to receiving any services. Each agency has a written statement given to patients outlining their rights. This document varies slightly from agency to agency, but includes the following basic rights. Patients have the right to be treated with respect and dignity, which means you can't yell at them, you can't hit them, and you can't cuss at them, even if they make you mad. They have the right to make their own decisions. So this includes knowing who will be part of their healthcare team, changes to the plan, and they have the right to refuse your treatment. Patients have the right to privacy. Confidentiality cannot be stressed enough. Most of you have heard me say that if you break HIPAA, you as the person, even a high school person, if you're found guilty, that's $25,000 out of your pocket. So patients' medical, family, financial information, as well as any other information that you might learn about from them while you're in their home, has to be kept confidential. Patients have the right to quality care. They should be able to expect that their home aide has been adequately trained and the agency has resources to best provide the best care. Agencies have to inform patients if there are limitations to services that are being requested. What that means is, say you get discharged from the hospital and there's a home health nurse who can take care of your surgical wound, but there's not a nurse that can give you the antibiotics. The agency has to tell you that up front. Also, part of quality care is the expectation that patients should never be abused physically, emotionally, verbally, or sexually by caregivers. Yes, this happens. Likewise, the home care aide should also expect to perform quality care without being abused. So that means that you shouldn't hurt them and they shouldn't hurt you. Patients have the right to be informed of all financial information pertaining to their care. So if they ask you how their care is being paid for, you need to ask somebody else to answer that question, because honestly, even I don't really know the answer to that. So employee rights, just as patients have rights, employees have rights. You can actually go and look at the Department of Labor website and it tells you about your rights. Rights cover wage per hour, your right to work free of discrimination and harassment, equal pay for equal work, meaning that all genders should be compensated the same, boys versus girls, and right to time off for family medical leave, and multitudes of rights surrounding workplace, health, and safety. You have the right to be treated kindly by your patients, be free from harassment from your patients or their families, and the office you work in, you should feel safe. If you are never expected to do any work that's not listed on your plan of care and care for anyone other than the patient, for a comprehensive list, go look at the DOL. So some examples, let's go back. So written consent. So anything that happens to a patient, they have to be delivered, must require written consent from the patient and or a responsible party. So if a parent has their child in care and the child's under 18, the parent has to sign the document. When the consent for care is signed, it authorizes the agency and staff to deliver services that have been agreed upon. Remember that services are provided for the patient and not delivered to the patient. The patient and or responsible party remain in control of decision-making about the care, so they have the right to tell you no. Part of the consent allows the agency to make referrals or coordinate care on their behalf. So while that looks like a HIPAA violation to you, It's not, because it's healthcare to healthcare provider talking about the patient, and they've given us consent. The patient has an active part in designing the plan of care for the home care aide to follow, so they can actually say if you go in to give them a bath or go to feed them or whatever, that they don't want to do that right now, and that is their right. Remember that the patient is allowed to make their own decisions, even if they're not always the best decisions. So if your patient's alert-oriented and competent, but they're also an insulin-dependent diabetic and they eat 2 slices of pie, that's their choice. You cannot refuse to allow them to eat the pie, even though you know they shouldn't. The aide only has to report that to the supervisor, and then you can actually educate the patient on better choices. Sorry, Tyler. Examples of patient responsibilities are notifying the home care agency of any scheduling changes, personal or health information, following plan of care, treating the home care aide with respect and kindness. That includes nurses, PT, OT, keeping the home environment safe, not abusing any of the staff, and keeping the agency informed of any problems or grievances with services. So the home care aide has you have a unique relationship with the patient while you work in their home. Being with them so frequently and working closely with both the patient and the family can be an intimate and emotional experience. You actually become part of the family, and that's hard not to do. So it's important for you to maintain professional boundaries at all times. And Ms. Todd can actually tell you it's very hard when you see somebody every single day for a year to not get close to them. Boundaries protect you from being too involved. Likewise, they also protect the patient by keeping the patient at a safe emotional distance, because when the care is terminated, your patient may ask for your personal cell phone number, and that is not something that you want to provide. Healthcare professionals or any other helping or caring profession have very specific boundaries, many of which are ethical and sometimes legal issues. Examples of these potential issues include engaging in outside personal relationships with a patient. So you can't date the patient's son just because he's hot, nor can you date the daughter because she's cute. Inappropriate financial dealings with a patient. Interfering in a patient's personal relationship if they have a dispute with their partner. Taking any gift or money from the patient, giving patients your personal cell phone or home telephone numbers, visiting the patient when you are not assigned to work with them, discussing your personal life with a patient. This can be massively problematic, and those of you that are taking the CNA course, we will go into this in great detail. Going places with a patient outside of work-related activities. Engaging in intimate sexual activities with a patient. These are all prohibited. It's well-intentioned aides and nurses or patients that sometimes cross that ethical line. So perhaps you may hear things like, I'm just trying to be nice, or I don't want to hurt their feelings. And you may not realize what's happening, but you could potentially be teetering on that ethical problem. So as a home care aide or working in someone's home, you can't trust that the patient will know the professional or ethical boundaries. You have to have knowledge, training, and the support of a boss to prevent or correct these problems. Even though agencies have code of ethics in place and patients have rights and responsibilities, printed and distributed, these ethical dilemmas oftentimes still arise. They can be any situation that makes you question if you're doing the right thing, if the family's doing the right thing, or if the patient can be in danger either from themselves or others. If an ethical dilemma arises, you need to let someone higher than you know. So an example of an ethical dilemma could be the patient is an insulin-dependent diabetic and a recovering alcoholic. And you walk in and your patient's eating ice cream and having a mixed drink. What do? So you're going to see as a to-do the case scenarios. So I want you to look at that. It's going to actually be on the Edmodo site. So pull up the case scenarios, and that's going to be part of your work to hand in on this unit. So patient abuse and neglect: physical, sexual, psychological, financial neglect. So you have to be able to recognize patient abuse and neglect because seniors or the elderly are often more compromised due to poor health and little social support. The impact of abuse can be life-threatening. You always have to be aware of signs and symptoms of abuse and must report these to the supervisors. If you become an in-home aide, a lot of times you'll work frequent and intimate contact with patients, and you'll be the first one to see the abuse. It's noteworthy that older women, actually 67%, are far more likely than men to suffer from abuse, and slightly more than half of the alleged perpetrators of elder abuse were female. So it's women abusing elderly women. 20% of elder abuse involved caregiver neglect. 15% centered on emotional, psychological, or verbal abuse. 15% involved financial exploitation. 11% was physical abuse, and 1% was sexual abuse. Signs of physical abuse could include, but are not limited to, unexplained bruising, dislocations, fractures, injuries to the face or head, and sometimes burns. So interestingly enough, sometimes when you bathe a patient, you may see genital or rectal tearing. They may have an STD. They may be in pain. You may see bruising or itching in the genital area. Psychologically, your patient may become withdrawn, have poor self-esteem, and if they're frightened by the caregiver, you may see depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and verbalizations of those thoughts. Financially, financial abuse or exploitation means taking money from the patient without their consent, or if the patient feels forced to give the money away. This is something the patient will usually tell you about, and it's often difficult to see this. Neglect is if the patient is not being fed, changed, or is being left alone away from socialization. An example would be if the home care aide changes a diaper before they leave and the same diaper's on the next morning when you come back. If you suspect abuse, you have to report this. This is a mandatory report by law. We've discussed abuse by the family or caregiver, but also abuse can happen at the hands of us, the professional. Please note that any abuse, neglect, or exploitation of a patient is prohibited, and you can go to jail. Patient abuse and neglect involves home care aides. There's abuse. So the majority of nurse aides who provide services in home care are capable and caring people. However, sometimes allegations are suspected involving aides or other unlicensed healthcare workers. Healthcare employers are required to submit reports to the Healthcare Personnel Registry Investigations Branch. In this case, the term allegation means one of the following: abuse of a resident, neglect of a resident, diversion of drugs belonging to a resident, diversion of drugs belonging to a healthcare facility, fraud against a resident, fraud against the healthcare facility, misappropriation of the property of a healthcare facility, misappropriation of resident property, or injury of an unknown source. It's important to know what these terms mean. Abuse means the willful infliction of injury, unreasonable confinement, intimidation, or punishment with resulting physical harm, pain, mental anguish, All right, so let's continue this. So neglect means a failure to provide goods and services necessary to avoid physical harm, mental anguish, or mental illness. An example would be not changing a patient's soil brief, leading to skin breakdown and infection. Negligence means unintentional wrong in which you fail to act in a reasonable and prudent manner, causing harm to another person or their property. This means forgetting to lock the brakes on a wheelchair and the patient falls and gets hurt. Misappropriation of residents' property means deliberate misplacement, exploitation, or wrongful temporary or permanent use of their belongings or money without their consent. This is huge right now. A lot of times in home aides, the patient will or the family will give you a credit card and say, hey, can you go to the grocery store or can you go pick up medicines? And you happen to need a toothbrush and you're there, so you put the toothbrush on their bill. That's misappropriation of their property. Fraud means an intentional deception or misrepresentation made by a person with knowledge that the deception could result in some unauthorized benefit to himself or some other person. This includes any act that constitutes fraud under applicable federal or state law. This means taking checks from a patient and write and cash them for your own use. Diversion of drugs. This right now is major, major, major. It means unauthorized taking or use of any drug. An example would be taking medicine from a patient's home and using it for yourself. And believe it or not, a lot of you guys do it at school. So you have pain, or somebody who's had surgery and they have a prescription for Oxy, or they have a prescription for Valium or Xanax or whatever. Ritalin is a big thing. Adderall is a big thing. And you take one. They may have given it to you, but you still take it. That's illegal. So you need to think before you act. So once a report is made, you're actually investigated by the investigations branch. And your name will actually be listed on the healthcare personnel registry. So we'll actually show you that registry on Tuesday. But if you do something wrong, trust me, they're going to hunt you down. They're going to find you. So home care aides can be faced with legal or ethical issues at their place of employment. A lot of agencies have an anti-kickback policy in place to protect both the employee and the agency from self-serving interest. This just means that aides are not able to bring patients with them from agency to agency. So what that means is if you work at Duke today and you go to Rex tomorrow, you can't bring your patient with you. If an agency provides monetary money to you to recruit new patients, that is also illegal. All right? So employers are approached and enticed with bonuses and commissions. They may be trying to bring on new patients, even if the patient may not be completely appropriate for the service. This is an ethical and a legal issue. So you are not going to do the next little slide, which says for you to do this little role play, which I think is cute but silly. And now you know the difference between ethical and legal manner. So you're going to do a blog post, and then we are going to talk about some drug diversion, and we're going to do your to-do list for this unit is to, of course, listen to this, do the blog post, and then there is a handout to do. And then you will have an article to read, and then we will continue on.